bring in France 24's international affairs commentator Douglas Herbert. Doug, this text was pushed through without a compromise. This is really the worst case scenario.
Worst case scenario for the critics of the bill. Now, look, for Netanyahu, his government, and their supporters, this bill, contrary to everyone who is protesting, will lead to more democracy, not less in Israel. How's that possible? Because they say it will actually rein in a Supreme Court whose powers, in their view, have gotten out of hand over the year. They have been sort of delegated too much oversight power, too much power to basically strike down laws that have been passed by elected officials, elected politicians, by unelected judges. That's their argument. Critics do not see it that way, anything but. It's a night and day thing here. For the critics, this is essentially Benjamin Netanyahu, who was sworn into power at the head last year of the most far-right government in Israel's history, a government composed of ultra-nationalists, ultra-conservatives, a very strong religiously conservative cabinet there. They see it as Netanyahu, even though the instigator of this law is also enthralled to this cabinet, that he is basically a hostage. And in the name of keeping his own power, that is ensuring that his coalition sticks together, they say he has essentially taken Israel hostage, the entire country hostage. And they see this not simply as, just another law now that will limit and reduce the powers of the courts, notably the Supreme Court. They see it as something that is actually a move towards a theocracy. They will go that far as to say that they see this as a move towards away from a more sort of pluralistic, more secular, more open-minded Israeli society, sort of as they would see it, the society embodied by the founders of Israel decades ago, a more sort of liberal, left-leaning type of government, towards a government composed of people who, in the name of reshaping the Jewish state in their image, this is how the critics would see it, are ready to basically impose their will. And that, in this case, is often a religious will as they see it. So when they see it as Israel moving towards a theocracy, away from a more pluralistic society, it's because that's how they see the makeup of this government. Obviously, Netanyahu's government will deny it. And let's be clear that this is just the first in a series of fiercely disputed reforms, right? All that happened today, this bill removes the power of the Supreme Court to overrule government or ministerial laws that it deems unreasonable, a subjective legal concept, of course. But there are more to come. This is just the first step, the first plank in more parts of this bill, which will be taken up in October after the recess.
Now, let's talk about what's happening out on the streets, because I spoke to our correspondent Iris Mackler earlier, and she said these protests are likely to continue.
And get worse, perhaps.
Likely to get worse. We don't know, but we've also seen a whole host of sectors come out and talk about this judicial reform process and say this should not happen. We've had the very influential tech sector, and recently we've had Army reservists who are saying they won't report to duty. Despite all of this, Netanyahu has gone and pushed this through.
This is the reason that the opponents of the bill, those who have been out on the street protesting, the tens of thousands who marched from Tel Aviv through the mountains to Jerusalem, many, many kilometers in scorching heat, they see this literally as a direct threat. They say that Israel's democracy is imperiled. They say, no, we are not exaggerating. This isn't hyperbole. We are not, being all bombastic here. We literally believe that this is a chipping away, and a big chipping away, of the sort of foundation stone of Israel's democracy. Now, Joe Biden, president of the U.S., Israel's staunchest ally, the purveyor of $4 billion in military aid a year to Israel, had implored practically Benjamin Netanyahu to try to at least reach a consensus, to not rush through laws that have been so divisive because precisely of the consequences in Israeli society. Doesn't mean the U.S. is about to abandon Israel. Far from it. The U.S. is going to remain a staunch ally of Israel. And Joe Biden's made that clear. He's not about to just drop Israel. But what he has done, and his view is that because I'm a patriot of Israel, because I support Israeli democracy, it's incumbent on me as a president to, when I see something happening in Israel that I do not agree with, and that a lot of American Jews also feel uneasy with, he has to call it out. Yeah. He says it's being honest, and it's the best way actually to be Israel's friend. A lot don't see it that way. The union right now in Israel, the largest labor union, is looking right now to call perhaps a general strike. The head of that union meeting with officials within the union with the goal really of potentially shutting down the entire economy. And like you said, reservists, many of them pilots in the Air Force, are threatening not to show up for their duty, which could obviously have an impact on Israel's defense capabilities.
And
or that's the fear.
What we're seeing is this clear rift in Israeli society because people who voted for Benjamin Netanyahu think he has free reign to do what he wants.
It's been, and the rift has been growing for quite a long time. The rift we were talking of, those who see a more secular, pluralistic society, and those who staunchly defend in Israel, they say the way Israel should be, a more nationalist vision of Israel, a more religiously based vision of Israel. Never the twain shall meet right now. That's why this polarization looks like it's only going to get worse as opposed to better in the short term.
We'll see how things pan out. Thank you very much for that, Douglas Herbert there.